Today I'm going to be reviewing every camera I've ever used for street photography. And part of the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I realized that with street photography you don't necessarily need the newest and best gear. Now, I've been shooting street now for around 8 years, and over this time period I've used a lot of different cameras. A lot of them were film, some of them were digital, some of them were point and shoot, some of them were SLRs. And so I wanted to wrap this up all in one video, share my thoughts on each of the cameras that I have used in the past to hopefully provide some insight for anybody out there looking to get a street photography camera, or maybe is just curious about what I've used as well. With that said, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later on in this episode. But for now, let's talk about all of the different cameras I've used for street photography. Little warning, it may be a little bit of a long video because there are a ton of cameras on this list, so be sure to stay till the very end. The way we're going to break this down is in the first half of the video, we're going to be talking purely about film photography gear. So film cameras, different point and shoots, different rangefinders, etc. In the second half of this video though, we're going to be talking about the digital gear. So whether you are a film or a digital shooter, I'm literally going to be sharing it all today. So let's get started. The first one that I want to talk about is a camera I actually don't have in front of me, but it was my first Leica camera, and that is the Leica M2. The Leica M2 was a great camera for me. I remember picking it up for like $500 or $600, and you know, it really introduced me to that style of street photography where it's really fast paced, kind of quick focusing on the street, run and gun. Now, I made a lot of great work with the M2. Actually, I shot my entire body of work for Crosswalk on the Leica M2 and a little 35mm Voigtlander color scope R 2.5 lens. And that little budget setup honestly really served me well for the time being. I kind of grew out of the camera though because I wanted something that maybe had a built-in light meter, and the Leica M2 was a purely mechanical camera with frame lines for 35mm, I think 75 and 90, correct me if I'm wrong. But it was a great entry point into the Leica system, and it really kind of solidified my love for rangefinder cameras. But actually, before the M2, my first true rangefinder camera was the Voigtlander Bessa R2A, which I am currently lending over to one of my buddies. For a long time, I shot with that camera, but one thing that was kind of weird were the frame lines. I think it had a really wide viewfinder, so the 35mm frame lines, it wasn't really too pleasing to compose with, and I feel like the rangefinder lines could have been longer because they were a little bit short inside. Now, with that said, the Bessa R2A is a great camera because it has aperture priority. It has frame lines for a 35, a 50, a 90, I believe, and it also has a built-in light meter, and it's an M-mount camera. So if you're looking to get into the rangefinder system that can take the Leica M-mount lenses, the Bessa R2A is a great choice for that. And especially if you are a beginner and you want to shoot in those aperture priority modes, or even just like the auto mode, the R2A is a great camera for that. My only gripe with it though is that it does seem to show a lot of wear and tear over time. You kind of have to baby it because if you knock it just a little bit, the rangefinder is going to get misaligned. So just a little tip right there. Now, as for the next camera we actually have here in front of us, this one right here is the Leica M6. Now, you guys have seen this camera so much on my channel because it's the main workhorse for me right now. You know, I'm working on a book called, ooh, almost revealed it. I'm working on a street photography book, and I've been working on this for around 2 years and ongoing. So the M6 has been the main tool for this job. I think one of the biggest things about the M6 that I really love is it gives you that classic Leica experience, but it has a built-in light meter and it just feels really smooth. Really cool camera. I mean, it's a pretty plain Jane tool. There's so many videos on the M6s online that I don't really feel the need to dive into it, but it's definitely my preferred tool as of right now, and it's a great performer. So consistent, reliable, all of that. That's how I would describe the Leica M6. Now, in terms of SLR film cameras, there was only one that I really used consistently, and that was the Nikon F3. Just sitting on a shelf right above me here, but this is what the camera looks like. I'm sure you guys have seen it. And the F3, in my opinion, is one of Nikon's best SLR cameras. It is a little bit of a heavier camera than, you know, some of the other options they have, but it has a removable prism up here at the top, so you can do waist level stuff, which honestly I never used for street photography. It was kind of just like a fun thing to look through. But I think because of how smooth this camera is, it makes shooting on the street really easy. The advanced lever actually has 11 ball bearings, so when you advance the film forward, it feels really good and smooth. And also the lenses are really sharp. You know, if you're looking for an SLR camera that you might want to use for street photography, the F3 is definitely one you should look into. Pair that up with a 35mm lens or a 28mm lens, which can go fairly inexpensive. You can get a whole setup under $500 and it's gonna last you a lifetime. One of my favorite SLRs of all time. All right, and last but not least for the film lineup here, there's one point and shoot, also kind of rangefinder, I guess you would say, and it's this camera right here in this case, the Olympus XA. Now, the Olympus XA holds a very special place in my heart because when I was first getting started with street photography and I wanted to shoot film, I put through so many rolls of black and white on this camera, and the results that you can get from it are absolutely insane. Now, it has a 35mm 2.8 Ricoh lens, which by the way is the same lens on the Olympus Stylus Epic. Also has a rangefinder patch built in, so there's a little lever here on the bottom you can use to focus. Aperture priority, you get all of the different apertures here on the side of the camera as well. And when you think about how small this camera is and how you can kind of tuck it into a pocket, go out into the field and literally shoot film with a full 35mm frame, by the way, the quality results that you get from this is absolutely insane. It kind of went under the radar for a little bit, and I think it's time for the XA to make a comeback. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about the digital cameras in the second half. But before we get into that, folks, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which are the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Now, if you're a photographer in 2024 and you don't have your own professional website, you need to start one today. Squarespace SEO and Blueprint tools allow you to set up a website within minutes from award-winning templates that cover a wide range of website styles. Squarespace offers flexible payment options as well, so if you are booking clients through your website, they can pay pretty much however which way they want. But one of my favorite things personally is the ability to have your own portfolio or gallery, which you can kind of portray all of your different work, whether you are a street photographer, landscape photographer, using one of Squarespace's really beautiful templates. It's a drag and drop system, and it's really simple to set up a website. So to make your own website today, head over to squarespace.com/KingJapes and enter promo code KingJapes at checkout, and you guys can get 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So I want to start off with a camera that many of you guys may not be expecting, and that is the Sony a7 III. Now, this is the camera right here, the a7 III. It's a couple years old now, and it has a Zeiss 35mm 2.8 lens on it. This is kind of like a setup that low-key has been really fun. Now, I remember this camera was like one of the best-selling Sonys of all time, if not the best-selling Sony. But because it is the last generation of Sony camera, you can find them online for a really good deal. And the reason why I bought the Sony a7 III was not even for street photography, but mostly for these YouTube videos. I filmed a lot of my YouTube videos on this particular camera right here. And then, earlier this year I switched to the FX3, so that's what I'm filming on today. But for street photography, this camera is extremely underrated. Just the feel and the size of this camera makes it really fun to shoot with. But one of my favorite features on these Sony cameras is the silent shutter. So I don't know if you guys can see this on the back of the screen right here. You can actually make photographs with no shutter sound. I mean, check that out. It's silent and deadly, like a fart. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like shooting with Sony cameras for street photography just because they look like a traditional kind of SLR camera. I mean, they're very easy to spot. But if you're looking for a really solid, high quality camera, the a7 III is not only going to last you for years, but it's going to give you consistent high quality images no matter what you do. So definitely check it out. I use this professionally also for portraits, so that speaks to how well this camera performs. All right, let's get into the good stuff. Now, I want to first talk about the Ricoh cameras before we talk about the Fuji cameras, because those are the main two brands that I have consistently used over the years. The first Ricoh camera that I've ever used that I actually don't have in front of me anymore is the Ricoh GR2. The Ricoh GR2 is a 16.1 megapixel camera. It is the predecessor to the Ricoh GR3, which is right here, which I will be talking about. And oh my gosh, I think, after this video, I might go online and just scoop one up because I really enjoyed the GR2. I shot a majority of my Philippines project on the GR2, and considering the size and how small it is with a 28mm lens, snap focus, the button layout is to die for. I sound like Dave Portnoy. With the undercarriage to die for. This camera will blow you off. But in all seriousness, the Ricoh GR2 is a very solid camera. And I think the images that you get from it feel very almost like film-like as well. And I think because it's like a 16.1 megapixel camera, it's not overly clinical to the point where, it looks like it's from a brand new Ricoh GR3 almost. And before we move on to the GR3, I just want to say, I actually prefer the GR2 over the GR3. I know, I'm sorry. Moving on though, here's the Ricoh GR3. This is a camera that actually Ricoh sent over to me. And I remember when it was coming out, it was this huge thing because they were moving on from the GR2 to the 3, and there were a lot of really nice modern upgrades. For example, you got a touch screen on the back. You also had the ability now to shoot at 24 megapixels. They included something called highlight weighted metering, which gave you these really nice dark shadows for that punchy Tri-X look that everyone knows and loves. And even though I said I preferred the Ricoh GR2, the Ricoh GR3 overall is the better camera. Ricoh took their time in designing a camera that was street photography first. I mean, putting in snap focus, highlight weighted metering, having that ability to have a 28mm lens. And you know, mind you, they also make other iterations. They have like one that has a 40mm lens, and then they have one like with a bloom filter, which is honestly kind of weird. You know, if you want like a modern day point and shoot that's gonna do well for all different genres of street photography, the GR3 is the way to go in my opinion. Now, there is one downside to the GR3s that I personally really dislike, and it is this control wheel dial right here. After a while, it ends up being non-usable. And so when I turn the camera on and I try to navigate the system, oh, that's really weird. For example, here, it kind of glitches out. Like, I don't know if you guys could see that. But that is only when you turn the wheel. If you just use the up and down pads, it does work normally fine. So, you know, you could kind of look over that. But the Ricoh GR3 is still a very, very solid camera. All right, moving on into the Fujifilm system. Now, I've used a total of 3 different cameras from Fujifilm. Technically 4, but one of them I really disliked. But let's talk about the one that I don't have in front of me anymore, and that is the Fujifilm X100S. Now, that is a very old model Fujifilm X100. It's the one right after the original. And I picked this camera up in like 2017 or 2018 it might have been. The autofocus at that time for me was fast, considering I also shot with it a lot in manual focus. And you know, the older Fujifilm cameras, especially like the X100 or the X100S, they're actually pretty reasonably priced online. So if you're looking into getting into the Fujifilm system, it's not gonna have all the new bells and whistles or maybe even like the newer film simulations and whatnot. But if you're a casual photographer, you know, and you want like a cheap Fuji camera, I mean, the X100 or even the X100S can serve you really well. And for street photography especially, it is pretty solid. Now, after the X100S, I wanted something that would allow me to change my lenses out. And so I ended up picking a Fujifilm X Pro 2. And the X Pro 2, till this day, served me so well. I use this camera all the time, and it's somewhere in my bag here in my closet, but I paired that up with the 23mm f2, and it is an amazing setup. The film simulations, the colors, everything about it, the autofocus is really good. And even though it is a very old camera these days, it's a legacy camera from Fuji. And, you know, I don't want to put that name out there as like a, you know, Fujifilm legacy camera, but in my opinion, when I think of Fujifilm, the X Pro 2 is one of the first cameras that comes to mind, along with, I would say, like the X-T3. I think there's a reason why Fujifilm doesn't really release an X Pro every single year. Definitely check that out, Fujifilm X Pro 2. And the last camera, folks, on this list is one that I never thought I would be talking about, and that is the Fujifilm X-E1. Here it is right here, the Fujifilm X-E1. This is an older Fujifilm camera. I believe it might have been the first mirrorless from Fuji. Now, I wouldn't have this camera in my hands if it wasn't for Ali from 112 Cameras. She made a video on it and it intrigued me because it's like one of the older Fujifilm cameras. It's a cheap Fujifilm that honestly can still perform really well. Just like the GR2, 16 megapixels. I think it's like a 16.3 megapixel sensor. But if you've seen the photos that I made in Hawaii on the wall, these were all made on the Fujifilm X-E1 and an 18mm lens. The camera is definitely not fast, it is slow, it doesn't have any of the new film simulations, but it is a very solid camera. And one of the reasons why I really like it is because of how small it is. Traditionally, the X Pro 2 is probably that big. The X-E1 is a fraction of that. So very lightweight, very fun camera to use. And in my opinion, one of the cameras I will keep in my collection forever. But that is going to wrap it up for all of the street photography cameras that I have used. Let me know in the comment section down below if you guys have used any of these cameras as well. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. And I want to leave this video here with one question. What is your favorite street photography camera? Why is that? And also, would you recommend this camera to your fellow photographers out there? But that's it. That's gonna wrap it up. Be sure to get outside with your camera, go document life, and subscribe for more street photography videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. As always, Minolta Gang.